Have you ever heard of wake steering? Stay with me and I'll explain. You and I have an insatiable appetite for electricity. Come with me and we'll look at the issues relative to wind farms and the communities that they serve. This is the Windfarm Guy. Hi, this is Dennis Stout and thank you for joining me for this episode of the Windfarm Guy. This is a different kind of Windfarm Guy video. I've been wanting to do a video on a fairly new concept, wake steering, but I just haven't done it yet. That was until a junior high school student science team contacted me regarding wake steering. One thing led to another, and the next thing you know, we're attempting a virtual meeting with this team of students. Rather than me being the one to ask the questions, this is the Spartan mechanics from Seven Rivers Junior High School in Katy, Texas, asking me the questions. Time doesn't allow me to get to all of the questions, but here's an overview of that conversation.
First we wanted to know how you got into this field.
I've been interested in wind turbines since I was young, your age. Back then, they were very small, but I can remember driving down the road, or riding as my father was driving down the road, and seeing these things and thinking, oh, wow, those are so cool. I never thought I would do anything for it, but I thought they were very cool. And then years later, I had the opportunity to work for a company that does that. And I've been doing it for 16 years now.
We'd also like to know how this industry changed since the first commercial windmill was set up.
It has changed a lot. It started here in the U.S. It started at Altamont Pass in California. It actually started in Europe, but when it came to the U.S., it was out in California, and they were much smaller back then, and they were on kind of these tripod towers. And they didn't generate very much electricity. And so you had a whole lot of them covering a hill or in a valley or whatever. And today, the turbines are much bigger, much taller, and they generate one turbine of today will generate what's, maybe 100 of those back then would generate.
How do wind direction and wind speed affect wakes?
They actually affect it a lot. The wind direction, and if I could, I have an example here I made, and of my little wind farm. This is the Spartan Mechanics wind farm here. And let's say that each of these dots represents a wind turbine. And let's say the wind is coming straight out of the north, okay? This turbine right here would have a wake behind it that would interact with the turbine behind it. And that turbine would have a wake that would interact with the turbine behind it. So let's just say the direction of the wind was this way, this wake would come a completely different direction and would miss, or could miss, depending on the direction, it could miss the other turbines altogether. And that's just a change in direction of the wind. So the direction of the wind plays a big role in wake. As far as the wind speed is concerned, the greater the speed, the greater the wake. It's just mathematics. And the bigger it is, the stronger it is, the more wake there's going to be.
Do you think there would be a way to kind of stop that from happening?
Wakes are a natural byproduct of wind interacting with something else. It's kind of like if you were in a boat and you were going in a boat, you could look back behind and you would see this wake behind the boat. Well, in air, it's kind of the same thing. But a wake occurs naturally when the wind encounters something else, whether it's a turbine or a house or a car or even you standing in a field. If you were on a hill standing there, just you by yourself, and the wind hits you, although there wouldn't be a real big one, there would be a bit of a wake behind you. And so it's just a natural byproduct of wind encountering something else.
Well, are there any other factors that have to be taken into consideration?
Yes, I believe there are. I think a flat area with not a whole lot of variation would probably be better than a complex terrain. I don't know whether you've seen it if there are wind farms that are in a complex terrain. They, when you look at them, you'll see the turbines all facing one direction, and then you'll see a few over here this way, and you might find one there in the middle that's just askew. It's doing its own thing. And you think, wow, that thing must be broken. It's really not. I wish we could see what's happening in the wind. But when the wind goes over that complex terrain and it's doing all sorts of crazy stuff, it gets difficult to predict where that wake is going to go. And each of the turbines are pointed into the wind because each of them has a small weather station on it. It's got an anemometer and a wind vane and such. And so you can guarantee they're all pointed into the wind. But that wind, if you're in a complex terrain situation, it can make them be very weird, and that would be hard to predict. Whereas if you were talking a very flat area, out in Nevada or even offshore, something like that, I would think that would be a much better application for wake steering. I don't know. It's theory now. The whole concept is theory, but I would think something to consider would be the terrain itself.
Do you think plateaus would be considered as difficult terrain because since they're flat, would it be possible to put windmills on them?
I grew up in West Texas, and West Texas has what we call mesas. Those are mountains that come up like this, and then there's kind of a flat top. And many of those have wind farms on them. And so, yes, they are good places to put them.
Based on what we researched, so regular wind farms, ones we were talking about, they focus more on how much each turbine is producing, but wake steering, it thinks more about the production as a whole. So which mindset do you think is more effective?
Well, and you bring up a very good point. Normally, every turbine is its own thing, and you do what you can for it to operate and generate the most amount of electricity and be the most as productive as it can. What wake steering is doing is getting out of that individual mindset and getting into a more collective mindset. What can we do to help the project as a whole to produce more electricity? And so in that light, that's a very good thing.
How exactly are wind turbines getting these wind direction readings?
There is a small weather station on each turbine that measures the wind direction and velocity, temperature, humidity, barometric. I mean, it just measures stuff that you would expect in a small weather station. And so it takes that data, and whenever the wind direction changes, it'll change into that direction.
Our second solution was we could change the height of the windmills, but we were unsure whether that would affect the wind.
Keep in mind, as the wind is blowing across the land, it is being slowed down by friction with the ground. And so the further away you get from the ground, the faster the wind goes and the more energy there is in the wind. And that's why you see turbines getting taller and taller and taller these days, is to get away from the ground. As far as the wake effect of it, honestly, I don't think it would change it much because we're still talking physics. But the one thing it does do is when you have taller turbines, you can have larger blades and bigger rotors. And if that happens, you've got to put the turbines further and further apart. And that might help the wake situation because the downwind turbine will be much further away. So I think you may be correct there.
So you said that windmills have been improving. What do you think is the next thing that should be improved on the wind turbines?
I don't know. If I knew that, I'd be rich. I'm not. It's as turbines get bigger, they get taller, and they generate more electricity. Which it's a great thing because they're bigger and farther apart. Farmers have to farm around fewer of them, and so it's actually kind of a good thing. But it's things are going to continue to change and improve. And I think they'll be improving in the production side of it. That's been a focus. Another area that they focus on is the sound that is generated by a wind turbine, and that is an area of focus. And any area that is a concern today, I guarantee there's a team of people working on that issue, trying to improve that area.
Are there any wind farm companies that use relatively innovative techniques in their farms?
Companies are kind of funny, just like people. We all have a different risk. Here's a phrase for you: risk appetite. You know, some of us like, oh, I don't want any kind of risk, while other people are daredevils. You know them in school. You probably put names on the daredevil and names on the person that, no, I'm not going to do anything risky. Companies are kind of the same way. And some companies kind of like the risk because with risk comes greater, generally speaking, or at least theoretically, more money to be made because they took a risk. And then you have other companies that are like, I don't want it risk. I know what. Let's just leave it the way it is, and we're happy with the production today. Every company is different. So to your question, yes, there are companies that are willing to take some risk and try some different things and some new ideas, but I don't know of them. And here's an interesting thing: the wind industry is pretty. They keep to themselves. They don't share what they're doing. They don't want their competitors to know what they're attempting or what they're doing. And so it's really hard to know the answer to your question, because if a company is doing something like that, they're probably not bragging about it because they don't want anyone to know they're doing it. Because if it works out, they don't want the competitors to use that same technique.
If you like what we've discussed today, please subscribe and click like below. If you have thoughts or want me to address a topic relative to wind farms, please also leave me a comment. Let's get one final question.
Where do you see the future of wind farms in the following years?
Interestingly enough, again, I've been doing this for 16 years. 16 years ago, we would look at areas where we could put wind turbines that were new at that time. As wind turbines improved and they were able to be put in places that we previously said, hey, that the wind isn't good enough for that spot, we passed over it. Now companies are going back to those places that were overlooked and putting wind farms there. And so I think as the wind turbines continue to improve, companies will be going back to those places that they overlooked where they said, yeah, this is a good area, but the wind's not strong enough to warrant a wind farm. Well, with the improvement of wind turbines, that day may be coming where some of those can be used as a wind farm.
Yeah, I think you covered all of our thoughts.
Well, thank you. You guys have asked some really great questions. I'm proud of you for trying to tackle something that is a little bit outside the box. It's not an easy concept.
You know, I have spoken to multiple school science classes, but this is the first time to do this sort of virtual meeting. I'd like to thank Jack Kline and Chance Zajicek, two meteorologist friends of mine that provided information on wake steering. I'd like to also thank the Katy Independent School District, Seven Rivers Junior High School, and this great group of students. This is Dennis Stout, and I'm the Windfarm Guy.
Thank you for watching. Working together, we can make good energy decisions and save our planet. I am the Windfarm Guy.